The Dependent's Tale, as told to Marina Lewiczka. The nightmare always starts the same way. A big man standing at the foot of my bed shouting at me, "Get up, hurry, hurry, pack up your stuff, we've come to take you away." I call out to my parents, but they've disappeared. My little brother starts yelling, but the man just shouts again. Sometimes it's a nightmare, and sometimes it's for real. The first time it ever happened, it was for real, but it felt like a nightmare. I was only 8 and my brother was 7. We were fast asleep in bed in our house in Bradford when suddenly the light was switched on and the big man in uniform was standing there. In fact, there were 4 men in the room, all wearing the same dark uniforms. I tried to scream, but it just came out as a squeak. "Where are you taking us?" "We're taking you home." "But this is my home." "Don't argue, just get your clothes on and pack what you need." "Where are my mum and dad?" "They're downstairs." "No, you can't talk to them. Just pack up all you need to take for your whole family." I was only 8, so I had no idea what to take. I took my favourite toys and some bed sheets and towels that were in the room, but I didn't think of taking clothes or anything useful. My brother was screaming. I asked to go to the toilets and I had to leave the door open so they could watch me. That was horrible. When we'd finished packing, we were taken downstairs where our parents were being watched by 4 other officers, 2 per person. So there were 8 altogether in our little house that morning. My mother was crying, but I couldn't comfort her. We still weren't allowed to talk to our parents, but then we were all quickly bundled outside into a van. It was still dark outside. The van had a wire cage in it and we were locked in the cage as though we were wild animals or something. It felt terrible. "We're taking you home," they kept saying as we drove away and left our home behind. Later, I found out they weren't policemen or soldiers at all. They were called escorts and they worked for a private company that is contracted to the government. I don't know who draws up the guidelines for how they should treat people they're deporting or keeps a check on how they behave. It seems a bit incredible that they thought they needed 4 grown men to manage me and my 7-year-old brother. We were so dangerous. Hours later, we arrived at a place called Yarl's Wood. We were given a bag to take in what we needed and my parents got upset that we had packed so much useless stuff. But of course, we didn't know what to take. My first impression of Yarl's Wood was a funny smell like a hospital and long grey painted corridors with lots of doors that had to be unlocked and locked each time you went through. We were given 2 adjoining rooms, my parents in one, my brother and me in the other. All the furniture was bolted to the floor and there were bars on the windows. But one of the worst things was they could just come into your room at any time. We had no privacy. If I stood on tiptoe and held on to the bars, I could see a small playground down below, enclosed by high walls. That was the only place we could be allowed to feel like children. We stayed 24 days in Yarl's Wood. Each day started with a roll call at 6 a.m. when they marched into our rooms and counted us. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breakfast was from 7:30 to 8 a.m. It was always the same: eggs, toast, cornflakes in a big canteen and everybody sat with their families. That sounds quite nice, doesn't it? But it was actually quite scary because there was often someone who was screaming or panicking or having a tantrum and banging and shouting. Once we overslept and missed breakfast and that meant we wouldn't have anything to eat until lunch at 1 o'clock. Then my dad lost it and started shouting and crying. It was terrible to see him like that. My parents were quite good at hiding it, but suddenly at times like that you realise the stress they were under. At that time, I didn't know anything about their application for refugee status and why they kept on getting turned down. I just knew what it felt like to be 8 years old and not know where we were going or why my parents were so upset or when the big man out of my nightmares would appear again at the foot of my bed. Later on, I learnt that my parents couldn't stay in the former Soviet country they came from because my mum is a Christian and my dad is a Muslim and mixed marriages are not allowed and people said they would kill us. When my brother and I went to school, some kids would always pick a fight with us because our parents were different. Everybody in Yarl's Wood was in the same situation or worse. They did not know whether they would be allowed to stay or what would happen to them if they were sent home. Some people went a bit crazy, and my mum got sick with asthma and high blood pressure and panic attacks. She got very thin and nervy, and she didn't seem like my mum at all. Whenever she went to the medical centre, they said, "Are you sure you're not just making it up? Go and take a paracetamol." It was me that had to look after her, and I had to be like a grown-up, even though I was only 8. During the day, we spent our time in the library or the playground, or sometimes we went to school. It wasn't a proper school. We didn't learn anything. We just did things like colouring in to pass the time. But one of the teachers was nice and encouraged us. Most of the security guards just shouted at us like we were just animals. One day, in the dining room, I met a young Kurdish girl and we made friends. She was so funny and lively, and she wasn't scared of anything, and that made me feel better. And after that, we stuck together. After about 3 weeks, we suddenly got news that Mum and my brother and I could be released. It felt good to be free, and I was so glad to say goodbye to Yarl's Wood. Little did I know that I would see that horrible place again. We were taken back to our house in Bradford, but our dad was not allowed to come. They took him to a place near Oxford. Being at home without him was scary because we never knew when we'd see him again. Mum was crying all the time, and she got very dependent on me, even though I was classed as the dependent. Then, after about 3 months, it happened all over again. The banging on the door at 6 a.m, the big man at the foot of my bed shouting, "Quick, hurry up and pack, we've come to take you home." This time they took us straight to the airport where we met up with our dad. The guards were shouting at us saying, "If you try anything, we'll have to handcuff you." So we didn't struggle, we just got on the plane, and I don't know what happened next because I fell asleep, and when I woke up, we were in our country. It felt so strange being there. Although they said we were going home, it was not like being at home at all, but somewhere strange and unfamiliar. When we got back, Mum blacked out and was rushed to hospital, and we were separated from our dad. We had nowhere to go, so we just kept on moving around to different people's houses. Then Mum tried to come back to England again. I was so happy to be back in Folkestone again because I felt safe. This time we were not sent to Bradford, we were sent to Wales. Mum started to cry at first because it was unfamiliar, but it was very nice. I went to school and started to make friends. Everything seemed normal, but Mum kept saying, "Don't buy anything new, clothes or toys, don't get too settled because we may have to move soon." But that wasn't the end of the nightmares. They carried on. Always a bit different, but always the same. One night, I had a dream that I was lying on a sofa in the dark when a man walked in and started shouting to get up and hurry. They were taking us home. I woke up screaming, and then I realised it was just a dream, and I fell asleep again. And then it happened again, and this time it was real. It was the same thing over again. This time there were 6 people all in the bedroom, including a woman who was taking photos of us, and Mum was once more on her own downstairs while we packed. They got us into the caged van, but this time we only went as far as the police station. Mum told them we hadn't had a reply to our letter, our case was still pending, and they made us wait inside the van while they checked. So we were taken back home. That time of waiting was the worst. Or maybe it was because I was older and could remember more. I started to be scared of everything. I had the nightmare early, every night. My brother started wetting his bed. Mum was anxious and got very thin. She kept the door locked at all times and wedged it with a rolling pin. Then, a couple of months later, it happened all over again. The banging on the door in the early morning, the shouting, the packing, the caged van. Only this time, one thing was different. I had a friend at school, and I managed to ring her, and she told her parents, and lots of people came from all over the area and gathered outside our house protesting and pleading with them to let us stay. It felt much better because we were no longer alone, but people could see what we were going through. It didn't make any difference, we still had to go. They took us all the way back to Yawswood. They wouldn't even let us get out to go to the toilet, and Mum was so embarrassed because she weed in the van. Once again, we were in Yawswood. To my delight, my old friend was there too. She said that it was the 4th time they were trying to deport her, but this time it was different. Far more people were now aware of the situation in Yawswood through the Yawswood Befrienders, and there was a big campaign building up with people including Natasha Walter and Juliet Stevenson for women and children not to be held there. Through them, we were also put in touch with a solicitor who had more experience of immigration law and wasn't just trying to take our money and do nothing. I found out later that there'd been a big campaign for us in Wales too. In spite of all that though, we were still told to prepare ourselves for deportation. We got all packed up and I said goodbye to my friend. This time, I told my mum I wasn't just going to go quietly. I was determined to protest. At 2:30 in the morning, they came and took us out to the airfield. I was praying that the flight would be cancelled or that we would get a letter at the last minute. Then, just as they opened the door of the van, the guard's phone rang. Everything went quiet. Yes, I heard him say. Yes. Our deportation had been cancelled. Our new solicitor had succeeded in stopping it at the last minute. Mum fainted. I just sat in the van holding my breath until the plane took off without us. We were taken back to Yawswood and everything seemed as before for a couple of weeks. Then one day we were called by the teacher to go to reception. I was terrified because I was sure it would be something bad, but we were told we were going back to our old home in Wales. It was lovely being back in our old house and seeing my friends and all the people who'd been campaigning for us and signing petitions for us while we were away. While we were in Wales, we also got news from our dad. He was in France and he'd been given refugee status there and he would apply for residence to come to the UK. In 2009, we were all reunited. Now, I'm a student in my 3rd year at LSE, reading law. So, you might think that this is a story with a happy ending. And in a way it is. But in a way I feel I was robbed of my childhood. I was forced to grow up and have to deal with things no child should have to deal with. Whatever people think about the rights and wrongs of immigration, it can never be right to treat children like this. From time to time, I still wake up in the night shaking with fear when I hear a loud banging or shouting. But then I realise it's only a nightmare.